Welcome, everybody, to the NHL Weekly Show on the Grueling Truth Sports Network. I am your host for the NHL Weekly Show, Mike Goodpaster, and right now I'd like to welcome in my co-host, as always, NHL beat writer for the Grueling Truth, Sam McGinnis. How you doing, Sam?
I'm doing good.
All right, so a lot of news. We're going to start off with Peter Laviolette and Kevin McCarty were both fired by the Predators. Was this surprising to you?
Not particularly surprising. The real question is how much of a difference will it make? Because they're very close-ish in the standings to getting a playoff spot, but it comes to whether they're going to be able to perform enough with a new coach to be able to get into that spot, because they would have to pass the Winnipeg Jets, which would be very difficult to do, but it is still possible.
Now, is this a team that a change like that can make the difference, or are these guys just scapegoats?
No, that could definitely make the difference. They have a lot of talent. That's why earlier in the year they were on our most underachieving teams. If they have a coach that can bring them back to the level they were just a few years ago, they could definitely punch their ticket into the playoffs.
All right, let's move on. And Varlamov has been doing well as a starting goaltender for the Islanders. However, Greece could be called the starting goalie as well because of the work that has been split pretty evenly between the two. So let me ask you this. Who is better? And who should the Islanders start come playoff time?
That's a good question. I think that it's definitely Varlamov. The thing is, though, is this is something that goaltending tandems have been doing in the NHL, is that coaches have been bringing it in and having less of like one starting goaltender and really having the equivalent of two starting goaltenders because they split the work so evenly. We had that last year with Calgary, David Rittich and Mike Smith. And you see this a lot more happening in the NHL, and it's actually a whole lot more effective, too, because it gives your goalies much more of a break. And then it can also encourage competition for whoever wants to start come playoff time. So I think Varlamov definitely should start come playoff time. He's been doing better, but Thomas Greiss has been a good starting goaltender in his own right for sure.
Yelling with the Islanders, that's a team that can't give up too many goals because they don't score any either.
Yeah, that is the big thing about them, is that if it's a high-scoring game, they almost always lose. They have to win low-scoring games to keep it up. So you're going to want, if Varlamov doesn't do well in the playoffs, the nice thing for the Islanders is they know they have another good goaltender they can go back to.
All right, let's move on to Tampa Bay and Toronto, who have both come alive after the first half of season hangovers, basically. Both of these teams, of course, were beaten much earlier than most, probably including themselves, anticipated last year. I think that's where you're going with the hangover here early in the season. But Toronto's changed their coach. Tampa Bay seems to be playing much better now. So what's your take on these two teams?
Yeah, it's very interesting. I think both of them had an issue with losing the way they did this last season. We'll start with Tampa Bay, obviously, getting the first President's Trophy winner to ever get swept. That hurt and really sunk in deep. And then for Toronto, losing for the third time in a row in a Game 7 to the Boston Bruins was another hard blow. And then they were able to get rid of their coach, which clearly has helped them. But I think the most interesting thing is the fact that the Lightning have won 9 straight. Quite an incredible feat. And everybody seems to be clicking back the way they were. But the real question now is, it looks like they will get a playoff spot, but the question becomes, is it just going to be another first round or second round dunk out, or are they going to be able to go deep like they're supposed to with the roster that they have?
Well, my question would be is starting the season off slow, though, and then kind of kicking it into gear, a little bit different than last year. So I don't think the expectations will be as big for them, and maybe the expectations is what did them in last year.
Well, yeah, and that depends on who you talk to, because some sports networks will call this, they have since the beginning of the year, Stanley Cup contenders. I do not think they will win a Stanley Cup, although it is within possibility because the NHL, everybody's got a chance. But it really does depend on who you talk to, because you go to NHL.com, they're not as high on the standings of power rankings. On NBC, they were number 2. So the expectations really vary compared to what they were last year. So it'll be very interesting to see those play out.
The Red Wings don't have a chance to win the Stanley Cup, Sam.
Yeah, I'm going to unfortunately have to agree with you there. But the thing is,
you said everybody, though, so I just wanted to rip on your Red Wings.
It's true. Yeah, I'm used to that. People do that all the time for me. respond with 11 cups. So unless you're Toronto or the Canadiens, we beat you. But as for the Maple Leafs, I think when it comes down to them is whether this head coach can push them over the hump of Boston or whoever they're going to play in the first round. That's really the sign of growth for them now, is can they pass the first round? It's going to be interesting to watch, and I'm sure for a lot of Maple Leaf fans, they're really going to be wanting that first round win this year after 3 straight exits.
Yeah, and we look at the Pacific Division, which is a big-time battle to top with Vegas and Arizona up there. What's your take there?
So I thought Vegas at the very beginning of the year, I picked them to win this division because I knew Marc-Andre Fleury, I knew the defense, and the offense isn't half bad either. But it's very interesting because you have two teams with very similar strategies, because both teams have very good goalies, both teams have very good defense, and when it comes to going back and forth, they're clearly the two best teams in the conference, or in the division.
Clearly?
But it's a very tight race.
They're
Clearly,
only,
yes.
I mean, you've got Edmonton and the Flames only a point behind them, and the Canucks are only 4 points behind them.
I'm well aware, but there's a difference here. Both Calgary and the Oilers have significantly less talent than Vegas and Arizona do. So when it comes down to it, whether they win the division or not, I would consider them to be the better team and pick them in a playoff win anytime. But as for those two, I wouldn't be surprised to see them go back and forth and eventually one of the two of them win the division. I would not be surprised to see it stay this way at the top.
Yeah, and when we move over to the Boston Bruins, who looked like they were going to run away with their division, a big slump leaves the Lightning only 3.5 games back from the division lead. Could somebody steal this from Boston?
Yeah, I would not that's something that could happen. I think it would be hard to do, but it's certainly within the realm of possibility because Tampa Bay is reverting back to what they were last year, and we all know what happened last year, 62 wins. They could potentially pass the Bruins, and heck, even if the Maple Leafs do well enough, they could also pass the Bruins, but that depends on whether the Bruins stay in this slump or are able to get back on what they were before it.
Yeah, because the Maple Leafs, 9 points back. I mean, you've still got over half a season to play. Anything could happen here. I wouldn't think the Panthers or the Sabres can make a run at this, but I think the Lightning
no, they're
and
too
Maple
inconsistent.
Leafs. Yeah, the Lightning and the Maple Leafs, I think both are talented enough teams to make a run at this.
Yeah, they both have a shot, and it all depends on who is the most consistent because they've all got amazing talent, all three of those teams, but whoever is the most consistent will win that division.
All right, let's move on to the Columbus Blue Jackets, who are a team. We had Stuart Mason, who writes for the Blue Jackets, on last week, and I know you mocked him for talking about the playoffs, Sam. And then right after that, they go to Boston. They beat Boston. They win their first two on a West Coast trip. Of course, last night they lost to, San Jose. But what's your take on the Blue Jackets now? Is this that big of a reach for you a week later?
It is not. They've won a lot of games. They were on a streak when we last talked about them. And as I always say, there's always a chance. But for the Blue Jackets, that's coming apparent more and more, is they're only 1 game back from tying for that wild card spot with, I think it's the Flyers right now.
Yeah.
The question becomes, can they survive without Korpisalo for long enough to be able to stay within playoff possibility?
Well, you got to say the coaching's been really good, though, to keep him in a position like this, don't you think, Sam?
Wow, yes, it has been good. I still don't like John Tortorella. I still think he's a little overhyped as a coach, but he has done well with what he has.
All right. I don't know why you got to rip on John all the time.
You rip on John.
I don't rip on John. I don't know John. All right, let's go ahead. Let's look at the playoff picture a little bit. And we'll start off with the Atlantic and the Metropolitan, the Eastern Conference. Is there anything here, any teams you think that could shock people and make the playoffs here outside of maybe the Blue Jackets?
Yeah, I'm going to go for a little bit of a big one here and say that the Panthers and Sabres both could knock out the Maple Leafs, and that all depends. Again, I go back to consistency. The Panthers have an amazing offense, and although their defense and goaltending has been bad, that offense can really carry them. It had earlier in the season. They were in a playoff spot on and off there, and so I think that's a legitimate possibility. And then as for the Sabres are decent all the way around, really, minus a spot or two. So as an average team, as long as you get a good streak or two going and you don't fall out at the bottom end of the season like the Sabres usually do, they also have a chance. Now, it would be more likely for the top three to stay the way they are. But if even one of those teams does good enough, they could also just snag a wild card spot.
Yeah, same thing. When we look at the West, anybody you think that stands out here as a team that could sneak up and grab one of the last spots?
I think the Predators, with the coaching change, will always be interesting to see. It all depends on whether they can use the talent properly. And, hey, they just won a game last night, and Pecorino's goalie goal, always fun to see that. But I think another team that is under the radar is definitely the Canucks, Vancouver Canucks. They're good, better than people think. And if they can do it right, they could pass Calgary or Edmonton and get into a wild card playoff spot or even a third place playoff spot and really shock people because Markstrom, good goalie, and they're doing pretty well. They got Elias Patterson, always a team to look at.
All right, next up, Connor McDavid versus Austin Matthews. Who's better?
Connor McDavid. I never understood why this was a debate in the first place, or it was just like Leafs fans trying to find a way to make Austin Matthews greater than he is. Austin Matthews, great player. Connor McDavid is better in nearly, if not every category that there is. So, sorry, it's Connor McDavid.
You don't have to be sorry. I'm not Austin Matthews.
I wasn't talking to you. I was talking to the Maple Leafs fans there.
Oh, okay. They're Canadian. They're Canadian. It doesn't matter.
So are the Edmonton fans.
Yeah, I know. But that's why this doesn't matter. Let's talk about American teams. I'm just kidding, Sam. We've already talked about one underdog from every division that can make some noise, but we've got a top 5 power rankings. And before we go to yours, I want to talk a little bit about NBC's NHL top 5 power rankings list last week, which were god-awful, Sam.
Yeah, they were pretty horrendous. When you have the Maple Leafs at number 1, who are 2 back from their division lead, and aren't even 5th in total points of the entire league, it's kind of hard for me to see that team as being number 1, especially with the defensive problems they've had in the past. I don't even know how they came up with that. And then the Lightning, they put at number 2, which I get that the Lightning should be up there, but number 2 is very generous considering.
Well, but it's according to how you want to do your power rankings. I mean, power rankings are supposed to be at this moment, correct?
At this moment and everything previously combined, it's supposed to be who's the best team now.
Yeah, wouldn't that be who's playing the best right now?
That would be who's the best overall, period.
No, not a power ranking. A power ranking ranks who the best team right now is.
Even if you put that there, Maple Leafs still wouldn't be number 1. That would have to be the Capitals.
Well, I could tell you this. I'm just giving you what I think they are basing their power rankings off of. Which I understand, but I agree more with yours, I think. But I don't even know yours. So give me your top 5, and then I'll see if I agree with you or not.
As for right now, with 30 wins, I have to put the Washington Capitals at number 1. It's pretty easy. Their offense is good. Their defense is good. Their goaltending is good. Their special teams, everything is humming for them, even though their recent loss to the Flyers. All around, they're doing incredibly well, and I see no reason why they shouldn't be number 1.
Okay. Number 2?
Number 2, I have the St. Louis Blues continuing to rise. They've now gone from number 3 to number 2. I know I haven't done this in a while, but the Blues are really staying consistent to what they were in the playoffs. Jordan Binnington, funny enough, just had a challenge with, Justin Bieber for a shootout for some reason. Just a funny thing, though. Their defense good, their offense good, not much of any complaints from the Blues.
Yeah, but how could you have them at 2 when they just get off a road trip where they went 0-2-1 and got outscored 16-8?
Listen, the whole team as a whole, when it comes down to it, recently, minus those games, have performed very well.
Yeah, but it's a power ranking, Sam. You do have to take into some account the way the team has played over the last week.
Well, sure. But as for the past whole week, you have flukes. Like look at the Boston Bruins for a minute. They lost. They had a recent slump, right? But they were so good that they're still 3.5 games ahead, even after going 4-5-1 in the last 10.
Yeah.
So could you really say that a team 3 places back from them is better? You really can't.
I never made that. I just talked about the St. Louis Blues, and I thought number 2 was too high for a team that had basically not won in 3 straight games and got outscored 2-1.
Well, they're also on a 2-game winning streak.
Well, now they are. But I was just talking about the overall week. Plus, once again, I'm trying to give you a hard time so we don't get boring. What do you got at number 3, Sam?
That's per the norm. I'm expecting that. 3, I got to put the Tampa Bay Lightning, which although I said it was a little generous for the NBC to put them at 2, but I somewhat understood it. I personally have them at number 3 behind the Blues. Again, though, you have 9 straight wins. Quite incredible.
How about this? Let me ask you this, Sam, just to throw you off a little bit. Is this number 3 instead of number 1 or 2 with the Lightning? Is this more from what we've seen in the playoffs in the past?
That's not why I put them there.
That's not what I'm asking. What I'm asking is, though, in the back of your mind, that has to sit there, doesn't it?
Yeah, this is the thing you got to talk about when it's Tampa Bay Lightning. It's not whether they'll make the playoffs. It's not how they do during the regular season. It's how they do postseason. It's the big question now. A similar question you had with the Capitals just a few years back before they won the Stanley Cup. It was always the question of, can they get past the second round, or can they win a playoff series? What are they going to do in the playoffs? They should be contending for a cup, but we don't know until we get there.
Yeah, but that's kind of my point, that maybe we downgrade them a spot. Maybe you've got them at 3 or somebody else has got them at 2 because they're not considering that much. They're just looking at right now the way it's going.
Yeah, that's something I do a little different with my power rankings. It's more like team rankings, I think, would be a more accurate way of me saying that, is I just rank who I think the best teams are, and that's the way I do it versus what you said. Some people might say right now, who's the best.
Yeah, because to me, that's what a power ranking is. A team rankings is what yours is. But a power rankings, I don't know. I'd rather combine the two and come up with it. Who do you got at number 4?
Number 4, I have the Boston Bruins. As I said, great team all the way around. They had a recent slump, but everybody has a bad section during the season, so not particularly surprised. They'll be fine. Offense is good. Defense is good. Goaltender Tuukka Rask, fantastic. Special teams also doing very well. Absolutely no complaints. It's just not quite as the level as the teams above them right now.
Well, and to be fair, 6 of their 11 losses have come in overtime or shootouts, too.
Yeah, and that's actually why they still have the division lead. They have the same number of wins as Tampa Bay, but they have 11 overtime losses, which converts to 22 points. Or, pardon me, 11 points. So,
all right. Who you got at number 5?
Number 5, I have the Pittsburgh Penguins, actually. This is a team that, despite its many issues, has come back from the dead, essentially, and they have fantastic goaltending. This is the thing that is carrying them most, is Tristan Jarry, a fantastic goalie, is up for Vezina, in my opinion. Should be number 1 or 2 in consideration, and between that and the offense is still hummed even without Sidney Crosby, they've done exceptionally well for what they've had, and it's quite surprising to see.
All right, so give me this then. After that top 5, just wrap it up with this. With the week ahead, what do you look most forward to? Is there any particular game?
I wouldn't put it at any one game, but the number one thing I would look at is to see if anybody can knock off Boston, if anybody gets close enough to be able to do that, because that is a huge question among many top sports people right now, is can they be knocked off?
All right, Sam, you want to tell everybody where they can follow you on the old Twitter?
Yeah, go follow me at SamuelMcG22. I'm always looking for ideas or suggestions. I'd love to hear them.
You can find Sam on Instagram, too, can't you, Sam?
Yep, same handle, at SamuelMcG22.
All right, and you can find me at Grilling Truth. How many followers are you up to now?
On which thing?
On Twitter.
Oh, it's not very high. It's 13, which is weird because we still get, on my posts, we still get usually around 1,000 views, even when you guys don't repost it. So I don't know what that's about, but.
Well, I've got 27,000 followers, but. I know you've only been on Twitter for like 2 weeks, so we'll give you a break. But go make sure you follow Sam and get him up above 13. He knows he's hockey, and today in about 40 minutes we will be on live with Anthony Savino on the NFL show to break down some NFL playoff action. Also today at 1:30 we'll have former HBO boxing historian, now the Grueling Truth boxing historian, Christopher Shelton on to talk a little bit about former WBC heavyweight champion Ken Norton. And we're not done there. At 3 o'clock today, former San Francisco 49er, 3-time Super Bowl champion, now an analyst for CBS Sports, Randy Cross will be on to break down the college football championship game on Monday night with myself. And then at 4 o'clock, legendary Xavier basketball broadcaster Andy McWilliams will be on to talk about Xavier's game upcoming tomorrow against Creighton and the game passed against Seton Hall. So make sure you check us out at Grueling Truth on Twitter. You can hear all of our shows on iHeartRadio, iTunes, TuneIn, Spreaker, Stitcher, Spotify, YouTube. Wherever you find podcasts, you'll find the Grueling Truth. So for Sam McGinnis, I'm Mike Goodpaster. You've been listening to the Grueling Truth, where the legends speak.